Today we'll be going over how to paint a brick house with gouache, and here are all of the materials I'll be using today. I'll list everything down below with more details of where I got everything. So we'll first begin by sketching out a general shape of the house. The final shape consists of two rectangles and a triangle at the top. Then we'll have our colors ready, so I've chosen to use a more neutral color palette for this. And we'll just first begin by painting the base layers for each section. So here I'm using a light brown. And at the top I'll be using a darker brown, and I've purposefully watered down the gouache a bit just so it kind of paints on like watercolor and has different varying shades. This will look good in the end when we draw in our brick lines. And at the bottom I'll just be using this light pink. Our strokes don't have to be very neat since brick has varying textures and colors to it. Now that we're done painting in the base colors for all the three sections, we can start adding in all the details. So we're going to start with the top section. And it's okay if the lines aren't perfectly straight. After we draw in all the other details, it'll be hard to tell if the line is perfectly straight or not. And I personally like this kind of uneven look. I think it gives the house more character. Alright, so here I'm drawing in the horizontal lines. And after we're done drawing in the horizontal lines, we're going to draw in the vertical lines, and this will represent each individual brick. Next, we're going to paint in a chimney. And a metaphor that I like to use is that painting a house is like decorating a cake. You start off with its basic layers, and then from there you could build upon it and start adding in all of your decorations and embellishments, like painting in windows, a chimney, doors, and all of the fun stuff. And so here I'm just going to paint a basic rectangular window, but you could paint your windows however you like. There's a lot of different shapes and options out there, but I'm going to stick with a simple one for this. Here we're going to paint in the middle section with a light brown, and again the lines don't have to be perfectly straight. Now we're going to add in little embellishments, so I'm going to add tiny little dots to the top. So to make the windows pop, I'm going to add shadow to it, and I'm doing this by adding a dark brown line to the right side of all three windows. Next, we're going to add in all of the decorative details to the windows, so I'm starting at the top. Now we can begin painting in the brick details to the middle section of the house. So I'm doing this by painting in the horizontal lines first, and then the tiny vertical lines. So this will just create the individual brick blocks. Now we're going to add some of the brick details to add more dimension to them. So we'll be painting in just varying shades of light pink to light brown brick colors all around the wall. Here we're going to add in little tiny dots all around the wall. I'm using a dark brown and very light pink to add some texture to the brick. We can paint in some more details to the roof area. I'm not sure what these are called, but I like adding in these little embellishments. I think it just kind of makes the roof area pop a bit more. So here we're adding in the shadow lines to the chimney, and then we'll just paint in the brick details. Now we're going to paint in the balcony. I've decided to use white gouache for the balcony, but I think a dark brown would also look good as well. So it's kind of up to your preference. Since I've already got the white gouache on my paintbrush, I'm going to use that to paint in some more dimension to the roof. So this white is just going underneath the brown line. And now I'll be adding shadow to the balcony as well, so it's going to go on the right side of each of the rails. I'm using a light brown for this. Now that we have the top two sections mostly done, we can start adding in the details to the bottom section. So I'm starting off by painting in the door, and then I'm going to move on to painting in all of the windows. Next, we can draw in the door details, so you can get creative and kind of create whatever design you want on the door. I'm just going to keep it simple with rectangles, and I'm using a dark brown just so it's subtle, but it also looks good if you want to use white and have the details pop a bit more. So just like the windows, we're going to paint in the shadow lines to the door as well. So I'm using a darker brown here. And now we can move on to the fun part of adding in all the embellishments to the wall for this last level. So instead of doing my typical brickwork with all the vertical and horizontal lines, I'm just going to paint in little brick blocks all around in varying shades of color. So I'm using a dark pink, a light brown, and a darker brown. And I'll also be adding in some white bricks as well. After we're done painting the bricks, we're going to add in some random colored dots all around in pink, white, and brown, and I like to group them in clusters of 3. So my camera cut off here, but I actually darkened some of the window panes on the second floor, and I'll be doing the same thing to the bottom floor as well. And now I'm adding in a shadow line to the side of the windows, and also again on the side of the door. I'm using a very, very light pink, and it's watered down so it kind of looks transparent. And I'll be doing the same thing at the top. So I'm using a very watered down light brownish pink on the sides of all the windows, and this just kind of gives it that extra pop, but it's very subtle. We'll be using a very watered down gray to paint in the sidewalk just so it goes on like watercolor and leaves us this nice varying shades of gray. And then I'm going to use a darker gray to paint in the edge of the sidewalk and also the sidewalk lines, and I'll be adding little gray dots as well. And next we'll be sketching in the lamppost before we paint it in, and I'm going to start by painting in the white light area, and I'm using a watered down white just so it looks kind of transparent like an actual lamppost. And then I'm using a darkish gray color to paint in the rest of the lamppost. It looks black, but it's actually not, because we're going to use black later to add in more of the details. So just like the windows and door, we're going to add in the dark shadow line to the right side of the lamp. And it's important to keep all of the shadow lines consistent and all on the same side, because if you imagine a light shining in from the left side, it would cause the object's right side to be dark. Now we can add in the rest of the lamp details, so I'm just following the natural curvature of the bottom of the lamp. The final details are adding in all the shine lines to the window pane, and I like to do every other window. Here is the finished painting. If you followed along with this tutorial, I would love to see your painting. Feel free to tag me on Instagram or message me a photo. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.